Hello, listeners. Kathy Lawless, Life Story Curator, bringing you this podcast series, How Did I Get Here? A series of interviews designed for people just starting out in their careers, people in transition, or possibly feeling stuck, and giving them access to the stories of people who have been there, done that, so that they might be inspired with some new ideas, or maybe just comforted knowing they're not alone, that everybody starts somewhere and everyone goes through times of transition and times when they feel stuck. And today I'm very excited to be interviewing Valerie Recore, who is a productivity specialist. Welcome, Valerie.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
And Valerie and I met through a mutual friend. This is the fun part, I think, about the podcast is that I interview someone who then thinks of someone else and introduces. And so it's been a great domino effect in terms of who I get to meet and interview. So Valerie, before we talk about what it's like to be a productivity specialist, I like to start with the icebreakers, find out a little bit more about you. So Where did you grow up? How many siblings? Where were you in the birth order? And how do you think that all shaped you as a person?
Yeah, I am a Denver, Colorado native, born and raised, and I am the oldest of two. I have a younger brother. We're about 4 years apart. And I think being the oldest, he got all the musical gifts in my family and the creativity piece. I think I'm much more serious and focused maybe. And that probably had something to do with birth order of just being the firstborn and just kind of taking on some small leadership roles or something along those lines. But being 4 years apart, I think also influenced us too. We were both just far enough apart in age to not really be super close. Like when they're closer, I mean, we are close now as adults, but I think there was that age difference can play, I think, an impact as well.
Yeah. Well, and you think about you're 4 and he comes into the world, changes your world, right?
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
You were like queen of your world for 4 years and got pretty used to that.
I got used to being, it definitely, I'm sure it changed things.
And then of course you probably had to be responsible for him. And so I can see how the seriousness would come to play. And then I've also read about, birth order that the second child and the third, each kid then tries to find their own way, and it needs to be different than the way of the other sibling. So it's not surprising, right, that you're kind of one way, and then he comes and goes, well, then I'm going to be this. I'm going to
this way.
These other things. So interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you said you were more serious. Well, what did you do for fun though, or for activities? Were you, if he was music, were you sports or?
I did a little bit of everything growing up. I played the piano for years. I played the violin. I was also a swimmer. I played soccer, although I was never good at it. I like to say that I was on the freshman team all through high school. They called it the JV team, but it was mostly freshmen and me. And so I felt like they were calling it the JV team just to make me feel better. So soccer was not one of my strengths, but I did it for years for some reason. Loved swim team, loved riding my bike, would just ride around the neighborhood and ride over to the neighborhood pool. I'm fairly certain I organized lots of things. I always had boxes of and we'll get into that in my story down the road. I'm also very sentimental, so I always had organized boxes of sentimental items like tickets and pamphlets from things that we did before everything went digital. I'm sure there was some creativity in there. I vaguely remember like a fort that my friends and I turned into, like a bush that we turned into a fort. So I was sort of all over the map growing up.
Well, and it sounds like in an era where you were outside more than inside, and it was pre-digital. So there was, that's how you turn a bush into a fort, right? I mean, that's what we did, right?
That's what we did.
Because there wasn't all these other things that you could build online. You could build a fort online now, right? Fortnite is
right.
a city.
Yeah. Nope, we had to use a bush.
Yeah. Okay, so introvert or extrovert?
I'm going to cheat. I'm an ambivert. I consider myself right smack in the middle of all of that. And I've always struggled with introvert and extrovert. and those labels, because I know people who are truly one or the other, and I feel like a lot of us fit in the middle. So I could be either. I probably am more of an introvert than an extrovert, but I can be an extrovert when I need to.
Yeah.
And I know we kind of learn those things. Like we learn how to be more outgoing when we need to be. I'm definitely a homebody. This last year of being home so much, I think we've all discovered that my family are a bunch of homebodies.
Yeah. Well, I love it. I've never heard that ambivert before.
The ambivert.
I love that because I think I'm in the middle. I'm a middle child, and I think that is a great description because there's times I just need to be on my own to recharge, and then there are times though that I need to be with others to recharge. And yeah, this year definitely taught us all how to recharge on our own. You know, how to be that introvert, but it is great when you do because you can kind of see, like you said, people who are the kind of the extremes are very much one or the other, not in the middle. And it helps us understand them, right? And where they're coming from and what they need and maybe how to better relate to them. So, okay. So on the fun meter scale of 1 to 5, 1 being couch potato and 5 being life of the party, where do you put yourself?
If I'm honest, probably closer to the couch potato, although I'm working on being less of that and a little bit more fun and adventure in our lives.
And COVID probably couch potatoed a lot of people, right?
Definitely couch potatoed a lot of us, yes.
That whole fact that you don't have to get out of your pajamas and all.
Yep, don't have to think about it, don't have to plan anything.
Okay, how about on the risk meter? Same scale, 1 to 5, 1 being 5 high risk taker. Where do you put yourself?
I'm not a risk taker. Maybe calculated risks. I'm working on that. That's something, especially in my business, I'm working on being more of a risk taker and jumping out there and doing things. But I probably tend more to the less risk taking side of all of that.
Okay. See, and you don't even want to give me a number.
Like a 2. Was it 5 was high?
Yeah, 5 was
high. Okay, so we'll go 2. Probably a 2.
Okay. Well, we'll see how that plays out in your story. I love all this personal assessment of these factors and then see how they play out when we hear your decisions. Because I might have to give you a little nudge here and there and say, well, that sounds more like a 4.
Okay, it's fair. We can reevaluate.
Okay, so tell us what it's like to be a productivity specialist. And then we'll get into how did I get here?
Yeah. So I work with overwhelmed and overcommitted women, especially moms. And being a productivity specialist, it's really helping women focus on not doing it all and focusing more on what we need to do each day and being able to let go of the rest. So I think as women, we take on way too much. We want to do everything every day. And I don't know if that's pressure from society that we just feel like we need to be on top of everything, trying to have it all. I think we do a lot of that to ourselves. We need to have this fabulous job and well-behaved, active kids and a spotless house. And we need to just be doing all of these things. And I think we put so much pressure on ourselves. And so I am on a mission to help women take a step back from that and really focus on what is important. What is it we want to be doing in our work, in our jobs, if we have our own businesses, and what's important with our families and in our own lives, making time for fun and adventure and maybe some risk taking in there, and really focusing on that instead of staying up late cleaning our kitchen and working too much, whatever that might be. Just really focusing in on what that looks like for each individual person. And I do that through one-on-one coaching. And then I also have a virtual community that is just designed to be there when you need it, to show up and get ideas and support and bounce ideas off of other people. I'm in there offering support. And
yeah, I can imagine, if someone works with you and they kind of get it and recognize areas maybe where they've been overwhelmed and been doing it themselves sort of, and they let go a lot of things, but fast forward 3 months, do they end up back in these same patterns, right? And so they would need, a support or a reminder or maybe some guardrails to help them.
Yeah, it can take a while. And
Well, it's just like when I clean my office, right? It looks great for a while, and then all of a sudden it's back to the way it was. I'm like, how did it get this way again? And now I've got to like what I see in the background here. So, okay,
Mhm.
well, so Valerie, thank you. That's a very unique business, productivity specialist. So, so let's talk about when you were junior high school. You mentioned a little bit you were organized and had boxes of organized stuff. But is this what you wanted to be when you grew up, a productivity specialist?
So I grew up in a family of educators. My mom is a retired social worker, and I always just thought that that's what I would do, that I would head that direction, get a psychology degree or social work degree and do something in that field. And that's what I did to start with. There wasn't, I'm not even sure, a whole lot of thought to that. I went to college and got a psychology degree and um, worked in mental health, both with adults and teenagers. Fresh out of college, it was teenagers, worked at a place here in Denver with teenagers, and I loved it. I taught a weekly independent living skill class, and it was teaching them how to budget and how to clean their apartments and how to buy groceries and all these things that we need to know to focus or to be successful in life. But they just hadn't learned and they needed to gain these skills. And I loved it. I loved that teaching aspect. I loved watching them build those skills. And from there, I thought I would go on to some kind of teaching or training in the nonprofit world, sort of one step removed maybe from the clients, but teaching staff who worked with clients and social services.
Hmm.
And so I went back to school, got a master's in adult learning. And I loved that. I loved there was organizational learning. So just how companies function and what that looks like, and kind of consulting in that field, and then adult learning is part of that too. What's funny is in my master's degree, I took a class on instructional design, which is how you design courses, training courses, and I hated it. I absolutely hated this class. And it's what I ended up doing after graduate school. Was I became an instructional designer, and I loved it. I think it was just the teacher was not a good fit. Not sure. But I vividly remember like really not liking that class. So out of my master's, I really wanted to go into this training and development within the nonprofit world. But I didn't have any experience. And so I remember I had at least one interview that I know would have been a job that I really wanted, but I had no idea what I was doing. I was fresh out of grad school. I really needed experience where I had a supervisor or team kind of guiding me versus me being the sole person doing this, which is what would happen in the nonprofit world. They have no teams, it's you.
Yeah.
So I ended up working in the corporate world for a while as an instructional designer, which was great. I learned a ton, learned so much, really honed my skills in that field, paid off some student loans because I was working more in the corporate world versus nonprofit. So the paycheck was slightly higher. And I loved it. I really enjoyed what I was doing in there. But I did not want to work my way up the corporate ladder, had no interest in continuing to be there I didn't want to be a lifelong corporate trainer. And then I had kids. And so somewhere along the way, throughout all of that mental health work and corporate training, I learned that you could have a business helping other people get organized. And so I got it in my head that I wanted to be a professional organizer, that, well, I like to organize things. Why? And I like to teach people things. Like, I should just do this for a living. Why not? And so when my now 8-year-old daughter was born, I left the corporate world and opened my own professional organizing business. And because I wanted that flexibility, I never wanted to be trying to balance the working full time and having kids, and just felt I wanted some flexibility in there. I wanted the best of both worlds, I think, was being able to work and to be home with my kids.
Back to your point about what women do, right? This is what women
Right.
do.
This is what we do. We want it all. I wanted to do it all. And so I did that for several years, but that business never really took off, partly because I had a second kid in there. So I wasn't really marketing. Like I never quite figured out how to not have my kids in daycare and market a business. You can't. That's just, you can't function with a business while your kids are asleep. Maybe somebody out there can. I could not. Maybe it's because my kids didn't like to nap. I don't know. And so it wasn't until my youngest started preschool that I was really able to focus on myself and my business and really getting things going. And then somewhere through all of that, I started to read more books on productivity and time management. And I loved reading all of that stuff. I loved learning about that, applying it in my own life. And I'm listening to friends and clients talk about how busy they are, and me going, I don't even know what that means. Like, what are you busy doing? Why are you up until midnight every night? What exactly is going on? Because I don't, what am I not doing that you are? And really, I had a couple clients in there that I spent more time coaching them on their to-do lists and time management versus their stuff and organizing their stuff. And I think they go hand in hand. If your house is a mess and you can't get dinner on the table in a timely manner, then it's both your stuff and your time need some work. Same for, if you can't find clothes in your closet in the morning because your closet is packed to the brim with clothes, then it's going to impact how much time it takes for you to get out the door. Mm-hmm. But I like that time management piece and that productivity piece better, because I feel like we are so focused on doing everything that we're just busy being productive versus these are the things I need to focus on today to move my business, my job, myself, my family forward. And everything else could wait. Everything else could wait. The world is not going to stop spinning if I don't get these 85 things done today. But things will be good if I get these 4 things done that are moving me forward. And I just really wanted to help women focus on that and really getting them clear on what it is that they're doing and moving them forward.
Yeah, because the list is, well, I know I'm a list person, and I'll put things on my list so that I can cross them off because I'm on my list. But I do get, there's times I'm like, why is my list so long? And why do I keep putting all these things on there? Mm-hmm. But I will also say I think a strength of mine has been the ability to balance what's really important. I've always been able to find time to work out, even when I was working full time and going to school part time. I was actually doing a lot more working out during that kind of a schedule than I was after I stopped going to school part time. And it's almost because I had to be so organized. Mm-hmm. I did it, but also I was avoiding, I think, doing homework. So I gotta go to the gym, and then the homework came later. But what also I think helped me was, as I ran out of time, I realized what I had written, what I had completed was good enough. There's another part mm-hmm. of me that it's not good enough. So I can keep working and reworking and rewriting and redoing. So just come up to the deadline and be done. And I'm getting A's. So something, it's still working, right? So I didn't have to be up till 2. I could be done at midnight, or maybe even at 10 o'clock, because I know I need 8 hours of sleep, and I make sure. So, but yeah, lists can be overwhelming. And I also don't have kids. I totally get that adds such a different dynamic in women's lives. There's so much more pressure. And as mom, it's crazy. The demand that we put on ourselves. So,
and I think it's, you said that right, it's the demand we put on ourselves. And I think it's gotten worse in this pandemic, as now we feel like we have to be their teacher and we have to be their entertainer, while also maintaining a slightly clean household and working full time and maybe exercising and self-care. And it's too much. I think that's just way too much. And that
we have to be just yourself and a friend and a sister, or and a wife, and do all those other things that are fun for you versus mom. You kind of give it. I'm sorry, I interrupted you. But.
Oh no, just that we need to give ourselves some grace for all of that and kind of shift those expectations from not having to be all of that all of the time. And
yeah. Well, how did you make that shift? because I mean, that's, you're coaching on this now. So you made the shift
Mhm.
somehow, or maybe you never had to make that shift. It just has a how you're wired maybe, or was there a pivotal moment that you kind of saw it and went, oh,
Yeah, that is a really good question. I can't say that there was any exact moment that I could pinpoint. It might be how I am wired. I know that I feel like, I would say maybe this is one of my strengths, is that I just look at things from a slightly different perspective. And I see things just a hair differently. And so I never, when my kids, they're 8 and 5, I don't feel like I need to be their teacher. I feel like that's their school's job. And I fully get that there are schools that maybe aren't providing the right education, or they're not like they're outliers to everything I'm about to say here. But I feel like most kids are going to be okay not having had normal school for a year or two. That my youngest is in kindergarten. They're both of my kids are in remote learning. They're home full time right now. We chose to keep them home. Kindergarten should not be done online. It just shouldn't be. But I also don't feel like I need to be the one to be giving her all of these other enrichment activities outside of her live classes. I've communicated with the teacher. If she doesn't want to do all of this other stuff, her teacher said that that's okay. And I think her playing with Legos with her sister, playing games, entertaining herself is just as good for her as if she was in the classroom or on the computer doing these other activities. And so for that shift for me, I think it's just that I like my sleep. I am not one who's going to stay up until midnight cleaning my house. I would much rather put the kids to bed and watch TV and go to bed. I'm not going to let food sit out and rot. I will clean the kitchen, but I'm not going to stay up late trying to get a bunch of things done, because I know that the world isn't going to stop spinning. It will all still be here tomorrow. I've definitely had things I love my list. I love my Post-it notes. But I can also be aware when there's something that is just being rewritten from week to week or day to day that I clearly just don't want to do, or I'm not getting to sit and really think about, do I need to do this? Should I just force myself to take care of it? Or can I just cross it off? Just not even take care of it. And I think we look at our lists and feel like we have to do everything. And we don't. I don't think that we do. And some of that can be outsourced too, whether that's hiring somebody to clean your house, or hiring somebody to help with your business, or bring you groceries, or asking your partner or your kids to help. Like, it doesn't all have to be on you. Just there are other people out there that can support you in some of this, and trying to simplify some of that as well, and what that looks like. Letting the dishwasher go. This is something I talk about often. If your partner or your kids load the dishwasher, don't reload it for them. Just be happy that it was done and move on. And I feel like those are kind of the things that we add stress to ourselves about. Like, we just feel like we need to do all of this. Yeah, I feel like I've veered way off topic from that conversation, from your original question.
It is interesting, because you made the comment that you feel like you think differently than others. And I always wonder how you know that, probably by talking to others. Because sometimes I think you don't know something is a strength of yours, because if it comes easy for you, you don't even, it's just, you don't even know others don't think that way. And I remember when I kind of finally really dialed into the strengths, using the Strengths Finder tool. One of my strengths is arranger, which is why I can create these wonderful photo books, right? I can take all the pictures in boxes and turn them into a story that now someone might want to look at, versus digging through, box and envelopes and all of this stuff, right? I want to have order to it. And I can take complex information and simplify it to where it makes sense. But I didn't know that was a strength, because I just figured everybody could do it. I mean, I've learned, I don't know, that's kind of what has been my philosophy in life. Well, if I can learn something, anyone can learn it. So, I mean, did you ever have any of that going on, which is, almost like I can't even explain it to people how I can do it because it's just something I can do.
It's just something you can, yeah.
Yeah.
I think the organizing piece of that, definitely. I have learned that, and this is partly also why I've shifted my business focus, is I like organizing my own stuff, but not as much getting into other people's stuff. It's just easier when I can be alone and can do it. I found growing up, and I don't know where this came from. I like to watch the adults around me and pay attention to what they were doing and sort of learn lessons from them. And I'm trying to think of course, now that we're talking, I'm going to just forget every example. But just really focusing on, when you're 12, somebody who's 25 or 30 just seems old. And I feel like that kind of shifts. And as we get older, we just start, well, then you hit like 35 and everybody starts talking about how old they are. I'm like, no, like you're so far from whatever that is.
Maybe a third of the way through your,
yeah. And I just never felt that way. I've always looked forward to aging, or because I think we have this potential to get better as we get older. And so then seeing people like who were adult, I mean, clearly I am one now, but I don't always feel that way, right? When you're kind of looking for the other adult in the room, you're like, who's in charge here? Like, oh, dang it, it's me.
It's me.
How did this happen? But when you're looking, there were always people who had kind of stagnated, who just stopped growing. And I knew that I never wanted that to be me, that I just think that we have this ability to continue to grow and change as we age. But I don't feel like that, to me, that's sort of part of that seeing things from a different perspective of everybody just groans about getting older. But I wouldn't want to go back to my 20s or 30s. I like who I am now, and I wouldn't do that again. Maybe there's some things I would change or wish I had done differently, but not really. And it all led to who I am today. But I don't really know where that came from, that seeing things differently and how that happened or when I noticed it. I think just listening to other people talk.
Yeah.
Like you were saying, and just.
That's interesting, this whole observation thing, because I remember as a middle child, I was always observing my older sister. I wasn't really looking at adults. And part of it too, I think, is being in the middle, is that, my sister was kind of pulling me, let's go do this. My younger sister was pulling me, let's go do this. So I remember I had this aha moment not that long ago about, I don't know that I really knew what I wanted because they decided for me. I was always just kind of going along with whatever. So when people say, well, what do you want? I'd be like, I don't know. And so I don't know that I observed a lot outside of our family dynamic so much as I was in this, really, interesting. So here you were, because you're oldest child, you would have exposure to these adults. And I think oldest too, you almost gravitate to more adults because you had them to yourself for so long, right? You related to them more probably than you did younger brother, who's like, he can't even talk. What's the interest there, right? So interesting. Okay. So did you ever have that well, is this my career? Is it good enough? I mean, have you had that kind of going on in your mind in terms of, well, what's the right career for me, or kind of that external view of what your career should be?
Yeah, I think it's all just been kind of one experience or one thing right in front of me at a time. I'm not sure. I mean, at least up through, but when I started my master's, it was just kind of, this was just what I was going to do. This was just not really what was expected of me, but there wasn't a whole lot of thought. It was, well, of course, I'm going to get this degree and I'm going to go work in the psychology world. And you can't do all. Yeah.
This next step.
It was just an obvious.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you can't do a whole lot in the world with just a psychology bachelor's. Like nobody will. You can only do a whole lot. You need a certificate or a master's, or you need more than just a bachelor's. And I don't, it was just kind of one step in front of another, and just kind of how that worked. I never really wanted just a job. I want to be able to look forward to what I'm doing each day, to know that I'm helping people. And some of that too has just been luck. Like I have a very supportive husband, and I have these opportunities to do what I'm wanting to do right now versus I must be working to bring in a paycheck. And so I think that's part of that too, of just, but I've also been told that when you need to pay your rent and you have your own business, you work a little bit harder because you need to put food on the table.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit more drive maybe, which I could see, but I also feel like I work at that as well. That's a tough question. I feel like I have really just kind of what appears in my life is kind of where I need to be headed next. And I've always wanted just that flexibility, that job that I can work somewhere on the road. My husband and I have talked a couple years from now that we could both have jobs where we could spend our summers traveling while working. So we're not tied to just camping on the weekend. We could camp for 2 or 3 weeks at a time, travel around, but we haven't taken that time off of our business. We're still working. I would like that flexibility. I'm not sure we would take a whole year to do such a thing, haul the kids around and do that, but just to have that flexibility is something that I would really love to have. And so we're working towards that as well.
Well, yeah, if that's a plan and then you make it happen, you might go, this was great. We want to do this every summer, or maybe you know what, we did it for that one summer and it was great, but it's, we got that out of our system, and now, what else is there? You mentioned earlier about you were thinking a lot about nonprofit, and then you went ahead and went into corporate, but didn't want to stay there. So what was your perception of corporate versus nonprofit, and why was that such a draw for you?
So I think the nonprofit is more just like social services work, really helping the community, getting into making a difference in the world versus the corporate world where it's corporate training. It's some big company hired another big company to write their training. And it was just, I was never very excited about what that topic was. Most of the time I didn't even understand the topic because that wasn't my role. It was, I'm the expert in learning and you are the expert in this topic, and we're going to work together to make this course happen. I think there's just a difference in culture between the two worlds, but I think that just making the world a bit better of a place, just having more impact, I feel like can be done more through nonprofit and social services work versus the corporate world. And they both have their place. I enjoyed working in both of them at various times, and but they're different in ways. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that, because I do think a lot of our listeners might be in one or the other camp. And so to be able to hear about the other side is, I think, important, because, some of our listeners or some of the people that I've interviewed have been in that corporate track, career up and to the right, and then ended up stepping over into nonprofit and finding it very rewarding. And then others have been, started in nonprofit, moved to corporate, have stayed there and have enjoyed that. And then others have moved back. And so it really does kind of come down to, I think, where you're going to find your fulfillment. And then, of course, now you're in the entrepreneurial space, right? Which is a
whole different ballgame.
Yeah, whole different camp. Because you're creating, your business, you're creating your material, your content, who you are, what you're coaching on, and you're specializing on, all of those pieces. But I can tell you, get back to listeners who are in this mode of, well, where do I want to start? Am I in transition? Am I stuck? How do you figure all that stuff out? And it's not always easy.
There's not always a linear path. I think it's just looking for opportunities, and it could be volunteering with a nonprofit, and just seeing if you like being in that space. It's a little harder to do that on the corporate side, maybe an internship if that fits where you are in your life so that you can get an inkling of it. My corporate career started out, I was a contractor for a while before I was hired on as a full-time employee. And so just really and they did that, the company did that as well, because they could hire and let go of people based on project needs. And then they had a pool of people to hire from if they were ready to bring on more full-time employees, because we'd all been tested. They knew who we were, what we were capable of.
Yeah.
And I liked that. But I think volunteering, if at all possible, maybe you work in the corporate world for a while volunteering on the side with a company that intrigues you, or so you get that experience and those connections, and you can kind of see what's going on behind the doors that in that culture, and if you want to be there.
Well, and it gives you like, if you're not receiving maybe a level of fulfillment that you're making the world a better place being in corporate, if you're volunteering, maybe you get that feeling in your volunteer capacity, and then decide if you're going to move into that space. I do see that. And that I did reach that point when I was in corporate. I was like, wow, I'm just not, what's the next move for me? I felt stuck. And then I got connected to this women's leadership organization. And once I got into there, then it was very fulfilling. And then I just saw a different way that I could look at my role in corporate and not look at that and go, oh, my job has to be everything that gives me all the fulfillment. I can be earning a paycheck, doing good work, doing what I'm getting paid for. But then also when I want to give a little bit more and there's mentoring and there's making a difference, then I felt like I had a foot in that place too. And that felt better. Plus I felt like I was, expanding my network and meeting different people. And I didn't feel so kind of, that my whole world was so myopic in one place, that it was more expanded. I guess I was expanding and learning and growing. So
yeah, which is the way to go. I think that's a really good way to figure out what your next steps are.
Yeah. So I guess we're kind of coming up on a point here where we might need to start wrapping up. So when you look back on your career and your life and how you've just kind of been taking things, I love that, as they've just been presented, and what's the next logical step, what do you think has best served you over the years? And it can be, personality trait, maybe a strength, or what's you best?
I think the word patience is coming to mind right now. I just think kind of just taking that next step of just knowing that the right experience or next avenue is going to appear, while really focusing on where I am now and what skills I can gain there. And then also, as we talked a little bit earlier about just that seeing things from a different perspective, of just really not just being curious about things and really kind of what direction might I take next, and not feeling like, okay, if I take this next step, it's going to put me on this path that I have to stay on forever. If it's not the right move, I can recalculate and kind of veer. So I think it's just, maybe it's being open. There's probably like 12 different answers I think I just gave in there. So being open, patience, and being open to what's next. So just knowing that I'm going to find it. And if something isn't the right step right now, then taking a step back or pausing for a minute and just focusing on something different.
Well, I love that word patience, because, I got to tell you, I don't think that I have that. Because I think when I felt scratchy or stuck, or I was, something wasn't feeling right, I was very impatient, right? And I was like, what's next? What's that next? And I don't know, I wish I would have had more patience of the right thing will present itself versus I got to force the right thing, or I got to figure it out. That's what it was. I remember I actually worked with a coach one time, and she's like, do you realize you said I got to figure it out like 8 times and we were only having lunch. I mean, it was only like in an hour and a half. I was like, oh, I got to figure that out. I got to figure that out. She's like, maybe you need to do less figuring. So did you ever have that scratchy feeling? Or?
Definitely, in a variety of at times. I mean, I think I've felt it a lot in the last couple of years of really just wanting to get my business to something bigger, where I'm having more of an impact and really getting out there and doing more and being impatient that I'm not there yet. Definitely feel that. But then sort of this pull of, okay, I'm really impatient to get where I want this to be and to get all these things in place and do all of this and bring all these people in. But then knowing that that takes time. I need to build and to do this slowly, and that it will happen, which is hard. It's hard to have both of that, like being that patient and just being like, but I want it tomorrow. I want to wake up tomorrow and have my business right where I want it to be. And just trying to remind myself of, let's get some patience in there and it will come to, it will happen, but I need to take these steps to get there and focus on those steps. And but yeah, definitely had that nudge.
Okay, so you are human.
I am human. Yes, please. I get impatient.
What I'm hearing from you, though, when you first started out describing, patience and that it'll work out, was that I got the sense that you're just really present, and that you're an observer and you're present and you're like, things are going to happen, but I just have to enjoy what's going on today, not be thinking about what else. It's just be in the moment. And would you say that's kind of your personality? Am I reading that right?
I'm working on it. Let's definitely being home as much as we have been in the last year. I am trying really hard to be present, both with my kids and then present with my business, where I am present with whatever task it is that I'm working on versus thinking about the next 5 things, which I think is what we do as women. Is we're never really present because we have all these things. There's all this chatter going on in our head. And so we're not always present, and I'm working on it. Yeah. I mean, the observation piece, I think, has always been a part of who I am, whether I'm aware of it or not. It's just, I'm observing the world around me and seeing how people function and what they're talking about and what they're thinking about. But I'm also at the same time probably thinking about the next 6 chores on my list that I want to get back to or feel like I should get back to.
Yeah. The difference is you can just say, you know what, I don't have to.
Right.
Yeah. They might creep into your mind, but you're not obsessed with it.
But I'm not gonna.
Yeah, you're gonna. Yeah, you can what's the word?
Compartmentalize.
Yeah, that's such a hard word. Put it over here and say, you know what, I can deal with that later. And be very present here now with what my 5-year-old needs, right, or what my 8-year-old needs, and what needs to happen. So
yeah,
cool.
I'm working on it.
Well, any other words of wisdom that you kind of over the years maybe really impacted you that you think would be something you'd like to share?
I would kind of back to this. Well, yes. So just this feeling that as women that we don't need to do it all, that we don't need to have our kids doing everything under the sun, that they can be bored. It's not going to hurt them. They can entertain themselves, throw them outside in some dirt. They'll be okay. And I think this being present, that I think we feel like we have more time when we're present with what we're doing versus just jumping from one task to another all day long. So really just sitting and spending time with your friends, with yourself, with your kids, with your partner, and knowing that we don't have to do it all. I think that's just one of the biggest things that I have figured out over the years, and that I really want this message out there in this world, is that we need to give ourselves some grace and just be present with where we are, because it's where we are, and it's going to mean more if we're focused on this versus everything else. And really how would I say that? So focused on where we are, and just knowing that we don't have to do it all, that we can ask for help, that we should be asking for help. Whether that's outsourcing or just letting something go, or just saying, I have days where I ask my kids or my husband to take care of something. I'm just like, I'm busy doing this. I really need you to take care of that. Instead of expecting somebody else to do it or feeling like I need to do it all. And just being more aware of that. What is on your plate? Does it need to be there? What can you let go of? And I think that has served me well in the last few years of my life with business and kids, and is just that being able to focus and then let go of everything else.
Yeah. And do you think that helped you be more prepared for this COVID year, since it was such a weird year, and it changed everybody's lives in so many ways? I mean, do you feel like you're positioned in a good place for that because of kind of that mindset, or?
Maybe. I think, yeah, I mean, I think one of my favorite things about this sentence just started out weird. My favorite thing about this pandemic, like nobody likes this pandemic here.
No.
But I think that this is such a brilliant time for people to be able to reset, to rethink, to reevaluate everything that we're doing and be intentional about building our life going forward. And whatever the next chapter is, whatever the next few years look like, and not just diving back into the way things were before, but really being intentional about who and what we bring back into our lives. And I've loved that. I think it's something I've probably just needed to do and so now this was my chance to really dive into that and really think about that. And I hope that other people are taking time to really reevaluate everything and what that looks like.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. I think that's exactly what's going on for me, and the different groups I'm in. Those are the things people reflect back on what you did gain out of the year. And I think I entered the year in a very busy mode, and I was busy. Busyness made me feel like I was productive, and I was doing things for my business or doing things to move forward. And yet, then when everything had to stop, and because everything had to stop for everybody, it wasn't just me, because what if I just made a conscious decision to say, well, I'm going to be less busy? I probably would have had all that FOMO, that, I'm missing out, and what are people doing without me? But because I knew everyone was, it just kind of made it calmer for me. But it's funny, just this week I was doing, I was looking back at my mileage for my taxes, and I was putting it all together. And when I look at what I was doing between January and March of last year from a mileage perspective, and where I was going and the meetings that I had, and everything was in person and everything was outside my home, I'm like, I was exhausted. And I'm like, wow. I mean, I kind of knew that was going on, but now, 10 months, 12 months later, I'm like, oh, I don't want to go back to that. So your point about being very intentional about, well, what does my life need to look like? Because, I struggled, with the pandemic of, am I doing enough? Well, I can't do any more. Am I doing enough? Well, I can't do any. And then I finally got used to, okay, just enjoy what you're doing. You're going for a walk. Enjoy that. You don't have to be thinking about your business or anything else. Or we went for a drive. All you have to think about is, well, we went for a drive. And I don't know. It really, yeah. I'm glad you brought that. That really has been definitely a silver lining out of this, is this I am appreciating just being present and not being in that, what else should I be doing? Am I doing enough? And so I don't know, maybe I need to join one of your support groups when we get back to a little bit more normalcy, because I can see myself, in that ramp up mode, right? That, well, someone asked me to go do this and someone asked me to go do that, and I just say yes, and next thing you know, calendar's full.
You're busy and full. Yeah. And I can see that happening because we've stepped back from that so much. And suddenly people are going to want to be with everybody all the time. And I want people to take that time to really be intentional about that and not just say yes to every coffee date that comes your way and dinner party, and making sure that really, or business opportunity, like really focusing on saying yes to the right things.
Yeah. Because I think I said yes to everything, and everything in person, which, I don't know that, because I wanted that connection, right? It just felt like it was a better connection. And now I'm looking at it, go, no, I think a 30-minute is, a 30-minute Zoom is better.
Saves you, yeah.
Yeah, it saved me 2 hours, a 45-minute drive, an hour discussion, anyway, which you drag out. But anyway, well, Valerie, it has been a pleasure to get to know you and understand your world and this productivity specialist. I think others will appreciate hearing your perspective on things and how you approach life. So thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
How did I get here?
Yeah. Thank you for having me. I hope your listeners will get something out of this.
Absolutely will. So listeners, if you enjoyed today's interview, please subscribe below so you'll be alerted when other interviews are published. If you have any questions for me or for Valerie, you can post them on my website, lifestorycurator.com, and I'll make sure to get them over to her and get them answered. I'll also post her information on my website so you can see how to reach out and get in touch with her. And on that note, I just want to wish everyone stay safe, stay well, and let's keep sharing those stories. Thank you.